Hi guys, welcome back to Gryphon Studio. So this week I wanted to make like a 5-minute video of how I would go about making a hill. Simple, tabletop, usable on every kind of war game kind of hill. Yeah, really basic. Cool rock faces and things like that. Maybe some interesting vegetation and things like that. However, I found things in my bits drawer that have been sat there for a while. And one of the things was a giant fleur de lis design, kind of like a plaster cast design sort of thing, which had been sat in there for about 15 years, and I wanted to use it. So what ended up being a really quick project ended up being much longer, but cool. And instead of making a hill, I made kind of a sacred site kind of hill, and I think it looks pretty sweet. I was a big collector of bretonnians for Warhammer Fantasy back in the day, and but you know what, this sort of thing could easily be used for things like Sisters of Battle and other things, or you know what, depending on whatever kind of designs you've got, just throw them on there. I'm sure they'll look great. So that's it, let's get on with it, shall we? Alright guys, so as I said, I found this kind of large fleur de lis design from a kind of craft fair thing a while ago. You can find these sort of things even on eBay or in little craft stores sometimes, and you know, they're really interesting. This one's made of kind of like a clay or a plaster or something, and it's pretty big. Like, that's a 28mm scale model, and yeah, it's going to take up most of this hill, so it should be pretty imposing, and also kind of like a bit of a statement piece. I'm going to use some Formex for the base. As far as basing materials go, I think Formex is pretty much the best one I've ever come across. Even when it's quite thin, I think this is just 3mm thick, and it's workable with a craft knife. It's rigid, it doesn't warp when you apply glue to it. Honestly, I think there's pretty much nothing better than Formex. It's also called expanded PVC, if that helps. And then I found some XPS foam, and this is I think it's 2 centimeters thick, and I wanted to make that as the kind of the main bulk of the hill. I want to give this Gorilla Glue a try. I've never used it before, and I've heard good things about it, though I was a little bit skeptical about it working, but due to the non-porous nature of the Formex base. The idea is though that you just spread it around. I'm using an offcut of foam here. Just spread it around, make a nice thin layer, and then you mist some water over it, and then press the pieces together. And by the way, the only reason I'm using a few different pieces of foam here for this is because I had them lying around and I didn't want to cut an extra piece. So yeah, I'm just a bit stingy. And then I put something heavy on top so that it would stay flat. And I used a utility knife to kind of craft the foam into a vague hill shape. Now, the giant fleur de lis here was sitting a little bit too proud on top of that hill, so I wanted to cut a fleur de lis shaped hole in the hill for it to sit inside, and it would look like it was kind of emerging from the rock, like it had been carved out of the hill itself. And I put on a mask, opened a window, I put on some goggles as well just to be safe, and I proceeded to melt away some of the foam for it to sit inside of. And I did this with a hot wire stick, as you can see here. Be careful if you have one of these. I do love my Proxon hot wire table, but this is one of those occasions where it wasn't really useful to me, and the hot wire stick was far more impressive in this situation. So then I proceeded to add some joint filler that was left over in the bottom of one of these tubes, and I just smeared it everywhere with my finger, try to get it around all the cracks and crevices, and blend the foam into the Formex base. Now, prior to making this hill, I actually made some rock faces out of some plaster of Paris. So I mixed the powder there with some water, stirred it with a spatula for a little while until it gets to kind of like a gloopy mess. Then took some aluminium foil, scrunched it up, and then unfurled it very carefully so that you didn't rip it, because that would be another mess. And just curl the edges up so that you get a kind of little boat shape, and that way the plaster of Paris doesn't leak everywhere. If you're unsure about this, just put it on a baking tray or something to keep it contained. Then pour out the plaster of Paris and smear it out into a nice thin layer and let it dry. And I put mine on a tray just so I can get out the way. Then once it's dry, you can flip it over and peel off the tin foil or the aluminium foil. Try and get it off in like one pretty big chunk. It's not always possible though. You're going to end up with little bits stuck to the little creases and things. You might need to dig it out with a knife a little bit. What you end up with is this very rough, kind of rocky looking texture. Now, I made this one a little bit thick, so I had to remake it again, a lot thinner, and to use on the project. So I made it thinner and spray painted it black for some reason, and then just snapped it into smaller chunks and stuck it straight to the wet joint filler that I'd just applied. Because these are both plaster-based materials, they join together and they fuse together very, very easily and very well, and you get some really good rock faces for your hills. It is difficult to tell with the footage, but on almost every single occasion where I place these against the side of the hill, the very thin plaster pieces snap in the middle, and that's fine. We're going to fill that in later with a bit more joint compound, so don't worry about that. Just make sure you get them pushed in nice and tight, nice and firm. Now for this stage where I'm blending the fleur-de-lis design into the hill, I was going to use some acrylic texture paste, but that's relatively expensive, and I had some kind of ready-made poly filler, which is just like a plaster filler again in a tub, and it was kind of on its last legs. I wanted to get it used up fairly quickly, so I just took that, used my fingers again, and smeared it into all the gaps to make the fleur-de-lis kind of seamless with its surroundings and hopefully give it a much better finish. And then I also kind of ran it over the entire fleur-de-lis as well to give it a lot more texture, and I got it between the rocks where they had snapped around the edges. And then, because I'm an idiot, I sprayed the whole thing black and then the kind of earth area brown, even though I was going to texture it anyway with sand and then have to spray it again, so you can probably avoid that first spray coat. So then, yeah, just PVA over the whole thing. Although not the whole thing, I did want some patches of rock still showing through, obviously, and a few patches of much smoother dirt, so I could place flowers and things on them. So once the sand was applied, I resprayed the undercoat on so it's nice and brown for a nice base coat for the earth. And then I painted, just using craft paint, a medium grey over the fleur de lis, anything that's basically stone, so all the stonework on the edges, all the rock faces as well. And then I added the wash, so this is just the usual wash that I would use for everything. It's kind of like a black brown wash, and I used an absurdly small brush for some reason to apply this, so that was a waste of time, so I used a big one and just kind of got it into all the cracks and crevices, made sure that all that texture was picked out, and obviously get it on the rock faces around the edges as well. I went back to the insanely small brush for this one, just to work it into all the cracks that were a bit too small for the big brush. And now to give that extra layer of definition and texture, I'm going to dry brush using the original medium grey that I used to paint the fleur de lis in the middle, and just dry brushing all of that and the rock faces as well, and that should help pick out extra texture and hopefully some really good highlights. Now I don't really have an appropriate earth colour in a craft paint, so I'm having to use some game colour earth for this. Very watered down of course, just to get some mileage out of it. And I'm using some no nails here to apply clump foliage. Yes, I'm sure that's probably a bit of a faux pas, but it works really well as long as you get the glue that will dry clear. This one doesn't dry completely clear, so I tend to have to cover the glue entirely with the clump foliage so that you can't see the glue after it's dried. It might be an idea to add paint to the glue, maybe, so that when it dries, it just dries maybe earth coloured. I might have to try that in future. So a bit of clump foliage, just picked out a few places. Didn't want to overdo it with that. Then I found some adhesive flower tufts. I got a pack of these ages ago, and yeah, I'm still nowhere near through using them all. I tend to use the yellow and white ones mostly, so you do get quite a lot of mileage out of these two. If you've watched any of my previous videos, you'll know that I love applying moss to my projects, and I mean like quite a lot of moss. The thing is, moss is literally everywhere in the world. It's everywhere so much that you don't notice it, because why would you? Because it's everywhere. I love applying this stuff, and I put it on a lot of stonework and a lot of woodwork. I'm using the Woodland Scenic's fine turf yellow grass for this, mixed it with a bit of PVA glue to make a kind of paste. This is a technique that I've shown in a lot of previous videos, feel free to go and check those out. Then I'm moving on to the static grass portion of the build, so I'm just going to use a paintbrush to work in some PVA glue. I'm going to cover most of this base in static grass because I want it to look quite lush and verdant and very kind of serene and quite beautiful. I tend to make a lot of grim dark terrain that's a little bit bleak, maybe you could say, so this one I wanted it to be a kind of representation of something that was sacred, and maybe lush vegetation would look better. And then I found some of these little leaves, these little scattered terrain leaf things, and they're really good. I bought these on eBay. They're just a a few pounds for a small bag of them. And again, you know, if you use them fairly sparingly, you do get a lot of mileage out of these ones as well. As I understand, these do grow naturally on, I think it's birch trees or something. So if you do live near birch trees that drops little seed pods, you can try and find some of these little guys on the ground. There we are, nice finished project. There we go, guys, all done. So yeah, I'm glad I actually went with a kind of interesting sacred site type hill in the end, rather than a kind of normal boring hill. Although normal boring hills are very useful in pretty much every single tabletop battle game ever made. But this is cool. It looks interesting. It's got design to it. Obviously, if you want to make one, you don't have to use the fleur-de-lis design. You can use anything you want. Maybe you've got things lying around the house. Maybe it's stuff that you don't use anymore, or that no one's going to notice if it goes missing. Or you know, maybe you can go in some old collectible shop or a charity shop and find something kind of ornamental and mundane, and maybe you can turn it into something interesting. Just weather it. Just throw texture on there. Blend it into the landscape, and you got yourself a really cool, interesting sacred site. Yeah, have a go. It's really useful. Also, definitely mix up the foliage. Definitely a good idea to, you know, choose a few different colours of flock. Add a few of these little self-adhesive flower tufts. They're really cool. Like I can't believe I haven't been using these for like years, because they are so easy and so useful. And yeah, give that rock texture a quick go. It's really simple and really easy. This is quite a cheap build, really. Probably the most expensive part was the foliage, maybe, but even that is like, you get mileage out of that stuff. You know, you buy one pack of these flowers and it lasts you for years. So really cheap piece. So there you go, that's it for this one. If you enjoyed this video or found it useful or informative, then please feel free to let me know below in the comments, and feel free to like and subscribe as well if you haven't already. I also have Instagram set up, and I'm also on Facebook if you're interested in that, though I don't really post on Facebook half as often. I also have Amazon affiliate links if you're in the UK. They are set up in the description below. I don't have a website yet. That might have to come in the future sometime. But yeah, hopefully these affiliate links in the description below will be useful to you. If you are in the UK only, I don't have any US or Canada links set up yet, which are my next two most popular destinations, locales. I've got a lot of people from Germany and Australia as well watching. How are you guys? G'day. And yeah, so that's hopefully you'll find those affiliate links useful. Obviously, it's no extra cost to you if you buy through the affiliate link, but it does give me a little bit of a finder's fee and helps to support the channel. That's it for this one. I'll see you again next time. Happy crafting.